You know that person who remembers both writing letters and sending their first email? The one who grew up without a smartphone but learned social media as an adult and somehow mastered both worlds? Yeah, that's a Xennial, born between 1977 and 1985. Too young to be a full Gen Xer, too old to be a true millennial, existing in this strange generational no man's land. And today, we're breaking down the psychology of Xennials, the generation society forgot to name, but science finds absolutely fascinating. Here's the thing: Xennials had the last analog childhood and the first digital adulthood. They played outside until the streetlights came on. They passed handwritten notes in class. They memorized phone numbers because there was no other option. But then, in their late teens and 20s, the internet arrived. And unlike every generation after them, they chose to adapt. Not because they had to grow up with it, but because they were old enough to decide it was worth learning. Psychologists call this voluntary technological adaptation, and it created something rare: a generation equally comfortable offline and online. But there's more going on than just tech fluency. Xennials carry a unique psychological duality. They have Gen X cynicism and millennial optimism living in the same brain. They're realistic enough to know the system is broken, but hopeful enough to keep trying anyway. They watched the .com boom and bust. They lived through 9/11 in their 20s, old enough to understand the weight of it. They survived the 2008 recession during prime career building years. And yet, somehow, they keep going. Not naively, not bitterly, just quietly, stubbornly, persistently. Here's something wild: Xennials are the last generation with a pre internet emotional baseline. They know what boredom actually feels like. They know what it means to sit with your thoughts without pulling out a phone. They know how to navigate without GPS, wait without streaming, and connect without Wi Fi. And that analog foundation gives them a psychological stability that purely digital generations genuinely struggle to develop. They're not better, just differently wired, grounded in a way that can't be downloaded. And let's be honest, nobody talks about Xennials. Every generational conversation skips straight from Gen X to millennials. But Xennials are sitting there, relating to both, but fully belonging to neither, nodding along to millennial burnout while also rolling their eyes like Gen X at people who complain too loudly. They feel the millennial financial squeeze, but have the Gen X reluctance to make it anyone else's problem. They're fluent in both generational languages, but citizens of neither country. Hit subscribe if you're a Xennial who's been nodding at every generational video, thinking, that's kind of me, but not fully. Now, here's the part that makes the Xennials genuinely interesting. They remember life before and after everything changed. Before social media, they built identity through actual experiences. After social media, they watched everyone else perform identity online and thought, I know who I was before this existed. That pre internet self becomes an anchor, a reminder that they existed, mattered, and had value before anyone could like, follow, or validate them digitally. Most generations don't have that anchor. Xennials do. But there's also this: Xennials are exhausted in a very specific way. They're doing millennial work, managing digital tools, navigating gig economies, building personal brands, with Gen X emotional conditioning that says don't complain, just handle it. So they're burning out quietly. No viral threads about their struggle, no think pieces dedicated to their pain, just silently grinding while both adjacent generations get all the cultural attention and sympathy. Here's the truth nobody says about Xennials: they're the most adaptable generation alive. They've relearned the world multiple times: analog to digital, desktop to mobile, physical to virtual, and every time they adapted without losing the core of who they were, because they knew who they were before the world changed. That self knowledge, built in libraries and backyards, and phone conversations that lasted hours, is something no algorithm can replicate. So if you're a Xennial who feels too old for TikTok trends, but too young for retirement planning anxiety, who gets millennial humor but also appreciates Gen X silence, who remembers the world before it got loud and sometimes desperately misses that quiet,
You're not lost between generations. You're the bridge between them. And bridges are always the most essential part of the structure, even when nobody stops to admire them. Tell me, are you a Xennial who finally feels seen? Or did you not even know this microgeneration existed? And if you want the psychology behind why microgenerations like Xennials develop such distinct identities, the next video breaks it all down. Click it. You'll finally understand exactly where you fit.